World of Gumball is coming back, but something isn't right. Because obviously we got a teaser trailer for the new Amazing World of Gumball, which is now called The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball. But it's not the title that's concerning. No, it's the fact that when we finally get to see Gumball and Darwin again after so many years, they're coated in dust, almost as if they've just been in hibernation this entire time. And listen, the joke is really funny and is definitely in line with the humor we expect from The Amazing World of Gumball, so what's the big deal? Well, honestly, it just doesn't make sense, especially when you take into account the finale of the original series. If you guys don't remember, the last episode of The Amazing World of Gumball showed Rob being sucked back into the void with the world seemingly falling apart around him. And the very next thing we see is the new trailer in which Gumball and Darwin are kept in some sort of limbo. They wake up with piles of dust around them, and it's not just them. The entirety of Elmore has some sort of paws on it. And I don't know about you guys, but honestly, this doesn't seem coincidental. The events of Season 6, Episode 44, The Inquisition, is going to have massive effects on the new series. And because of that, I think it's time to reveal what the Void actually is and the impact it is going to have. And this video is going to cover just that. And so, I think it's finally time that we uncover the truth. So, what actually is the Void in the Amazing World of Gumball? The first time that we're introduced to the concept of the Void in the series is Season 3, Episode 6, The Void. In the episode, Gumball and Darwin are trying to remember their long-lost friend Molly, who unfortunately seems to have been erased from existence. In the episode, we're led to believe that the world deemed Molly a mistake, and yet everything in the world seems to be off balance quite literally because Molly is gone. And even though the other students don't remember Molly, they still act like Molly is there, almost as if they forgot to remove Molly from their memories entirely. Through their investigations, they find that the world has quite literally folded in on itself, and when they end up going to the entrance of the void, it's quite literally a flat surface. And yes, Gumball has never shied away from breaking the fourth wall or showing that yes, this is a cartoon, and even showing us storyboards when the budget was gone. But unlike other scenes where they're predicated on some sort of joke, this is just the world folding in on itself. It's the world trying to correct a mistake, but not really knowing how to do so. And I'm gonna say this a lot in the video, and I am using this word very intentionally because there is a very specific point I am going to try to make. The world is taking everything very literal. In this episode, whatever force is removing mistakes from Elmore is doing it in a literal sense. It doesn't have any nuance. The world, or the force that is telling the void to correct these mistakes, is telling them to remove a character, and that's what it's doing. Basically, you're inputting a command and it's giving you the answer back and nothing more, and unless you're telling it to elaborate, it won't. Which is why it's pretty interesting that when Gumball and Darwin go into the void, everything is basically kept in stasis. That of course is except for Rob, but I'll get to him later. When they finally get to Molly, we see that she's kept in some sort of stasis, almost like you pressed pause on a video game. She's exactly the same as the day that the void took her. Basically, everything inside of the void is like an asset that you put in a photo, but if you don't want it anymore, you can use Photoshop and press remove. And listen, a lot of photo apps have that remove feature and it's pretty good now, but back when this episode was made, it probably wasn't that good, and that's basically what the void is doing in this episode. It's just taking things out without any regard for what's surrounding it. It's kind of like in its quest to get rid of all of the mistakes in Elmore, it's kind of just created an area filled with a bunch of mistakes. In fact, the entire void just doesn't make any sense, almost as if it was created by something that doesn't have logic. It's like thinking you can just mash a bunch of prompts together and make a cohesive story, but instead you just make a mess. Things in the void don't make sense. Why is Molly left frozen in time, but Rob is left completely untouched? The void is filled with all of these weird landmasses, but it's not filled with what's actually been taken out of Elmore. Elmore folded in on itself, and you would think that a lot of the stuff that was missing, like the lockers that we saw in Elmore High, would be stuck in the void, but they aren't. Instead, we have weird things like Pluto, except it's labeled for some reason. The void is filled with weird internet memes, extinct animals that people still remember for some reason, and Clippy? Pretty interesting that one of the first AI assistants got sucked into the void. But here's the thing, the void starts to make sense when you think of it like this. Every single time the void has taken something, it's learned from it. The void learns from itself. Every time it tries to improve the world, it finds a better way to do it. That is the only explanation as to why things like the dodo bird and Titanic are in the void, and yet people still remember them. It's because when they were taken into the void didn't think to remove people's memories of them. And that would explain the difference between Molly and Rob. When Rob was taken into the void didn't think to pause his reality, which could mean that Molly was taken later, and because of that, the void realized it would be easier to pause these characters in time so it didn't have to deal with them. And also, it would stop people from escaping, and eventually we see that Rob is able to escape because of the void's mistake. And I do think it's time to circle back to Rob, specifically when he ended up escaping the void. In season 3, episode 18, The Nobody, we get to see that Rob was actually following Gumball and Darwin the entire time, and ended up escaping by clinging on to the side of Mr. Small's van. And because the void was trying to keep him and the rest of the cast inside of the void, it ended up disfiguring him, causing him to have this glitched out appearance. And supposedly, this was just an unintended side effect of the void. Or was it? Think about it. When we originally saw Rob in the void, Gumball and Darwin just jumped over him, but he didn't call out to them at all. He just kind of stood there. Contrast that with Rob's perspective, in which he is trying to get their attention, and yet they just completely gloss over him. And listen, this wouldn't be the first time that Gumball and Darwin have a skewed worldview that is completely different from what's actually around them. We're able to see in a future episode that they can ignore people so much that they're basically non-existent to them. But honestly, I don't actually think this is on Gumball and Darwin, because Mr. Small and Molly both didn't see Rob either. Which honestly leads me to believe that the void, knowing that Rob would call out to them, stopped that sound from reaching their ears. And in fact, the void purposely made Rob a villain in order to fit the role in Elmore. Now this is where I may go off the deep end, but I want you guys to stay with me, because when we're looking at the episode of The Void, there are a lot of things that are made very clear. For starters, everybody in Elmore has a role, and when you take somebody out of that role, it can cause a lot of issues. And I think the void in this episode realized that when Gumball and Darwin went in to get Molly, that Molly was an important character, and that it made a mistake removing her, even though she was pretty boring. And like I said previously, the void is always learning. It's always trying to adapt and do things better, which is why it realized that when Gumball and Darwin went into the void, there really wasn't a force able to stop them. It also learned that you can't just take people out of society. No matter how boring their character is or how much of a mistake you think they are, they do serve a purpose. And after learning that, it was presented with an opportunity to create something that didn't exist in Elmore yet, a villain. And honestly, what a perfect opportunity, a person being left behind by those who he once called friend, gripping onto the side of a van for dear life and ending up getting disfigured because of it, causing him to hate the people who he once called friend, causing him to become a villain, which of course is exactly what Elmore needed. And for a second, I just want to kind of mention the other instances in which the void is mentioned throughout the show. For starters, we know that Banana Barbara did paint a picture in which the Watersons are in the void running from some sort of force, which honestly doesn't make too much sense when you're just taking it out of context. The Watersons are the glue that hold Elmore together. Without them, the show doesn't exist, so they can't possibly be a mistake, no matter how much they actually are flawed characters. There's an episode in season 4 in which we get a compilation of videos, and in one of those videos we see that Darwin screams so loud that he breaks the camera, but he actually ends up breaking reality, and behind it we see the void, which again is pretty weird. We know that this isn't the internet because we actually get to meet the internet within the show, so whatever this place is, it actually seems like it's a different reality, or at least a reality within the show or surrounding the place known as Elmore, which honestly changes everything we know about the void. Instead of being this entirely separate place, it seems as though that the void is Elmore. And although it's something small, this little tidbit actually gives away what the void's true identity is. And this of course leads us to season 4, episode 40, The Disaster. And the reason we need to talk about this episode is specifically because of a world-altering remote and the presence of the void. So let me just give you a brief rundown. The basic gist of the episode is that Rob gets a universal remote. Again, something taken entirely literally. So now he's able to control the entire universe that they're in. And because Rob is a villain, he ends up using the remote to ruin Gumball's life, and of course, a huge fight ensues. But during the fight, Rob ends up saying something that's pretty interesting. You don't even realize that none of this is real. And of course, I think it's pretty obvious that Rob is referring to the fact that The Amazing World of Gumball is a TV show. And even in the episode, we see that there's a screen that separates the world of Elmore from the void, and that of course is a TV screen. And we get to see in the episode Season 5, Episode 1, the rerun that But yes, the void definitely has properties of a television. And in fact, during this episode, we see that Gumball is using the remote within the void and realizing that everything looks a lot like a TV. Except for some reason, when he changes the channel, it actually is facing the right way, which actually doesn't make any sense and would mean that the void isn't actually the inside of a TV, right? Think about it. In the episode just before this one, we see that the screen is inverse and the Amazing World of Gumball credits are the opposite way, which of course would mean that you're looking at it from the inside. But in the very next episode, when Gumball is switching through the channels, we see a newscast is completely the right way. And not only that, we get to see that the newscaster can see Gumball and is reacting to what's happening, which would mean that the void isn't actually the inside of a television. Because if it was, that newscaster would have been reversed. So if the void isn't just the inside of a television, then what actually is it? Well, what do we know about it so far? For starters, the main goal of the void is to erase mistakes from Elmore, seemingly to make the show better. The second thing is that when the void ends up removing mistakes, it ends up taking it pretty literally and does a pretty bad job at it. The third thing is that it's constantly learning from its mistakes. Regardless of what it does and the actions that it takes, it tries to do better each time. And I hope that some of you are realizing that what I'm saying is sounding really familiar. Especially in this day and age, isn't there something that basically does all of this? Something that runs in the background, is available to answer all of your questions, and is constantly learning. It ends up taking things too literally because it doesn't have human logic, but despite that, it still tries to do its best. It's something that's supposed to be good, but in your heart of hearts, you realize that there's something pretty evil and ominous about it. Hopefully by now you're picking up what I'm putting down, that the void is actually artificial intelligence. And when you're looking at it through that lens, everything starts to make so much more sense. The program of the Amazing World of Gumball is supposed to run smoothly, and the artificial intelligence is in the background making sure that everything is okay. Unfortunately, sometimes there's mistakes, and the artificial intelligence will run a program in order to remove them. But honestly, it wasn't that good. Especially in the late 2010s, artificial intelligence was nowhere near what it is today. It's pretty clear that AI has evolved far beyond what it was just a few years ago. But despite its improvements, there's still some pretty noticeable flaws that AI has. It takes things too literally, it cuts out things that it's not supposed to, and honestly, it can do a lot more harm than good. AI runs on algorithms, it doesn't really understand human nuance, and I think that this is perfectly encapsulated in the last episode of the series, Season 6, Episode 44, The Inquisition. In the episode, everything that makes the Amazing World of Gumball so special is being stripped down, all creativity is being stomped out, and eventually this culminates in them taking all of these animated characters and turning them into real-life people. Obviously, this is supposed to be commentary on how so many animated projects are being left behind because people don't really care about animation, which is pretty upsetting because we know, especially nowadays, that animation can be incredibly profitable if you do it correctly. But so many times algorithms will say that animation can be a casualty and can save companies money, which is why we end up seeing so many animated shows canceled before they're truly able to flourish. And these profit algorithms are one of the reasons why so many beloved cartoons are turned into live-action adaptations. It's because many people just don't value animation. And honestly, it seems like the Amazing World of Gumball was one of these casualties, and that's basically what Rob is saying at the end of this episode. The AI algorithm deemed that Gumball wasn't profitable, and so Rob was doing everything in his power in order to appease this algorithm. But of course, he was stopped. Creativity was brought back to Elmore, but he ended up being a casualty. And since Rob had the misfortune of getting in the way of the void yet again, he ended up being sucked back in. And that of course brings us to the new teaser trailer for the Amazing World of Gumball. We end up seeing that Elmore is completely covered in dust, almost as if everything was paused, almost in the same way that Molly was paused when she was taken into the void. In the series finale of The Amazing World of Gumball, it seemed as though the void was taking over Elmore and putting it into some sort of stasis. And many people were confused that when the new trailer dropped, that we just saw that everything was coated in dust, almost as if they never went into the void at all. But that's not true. They were there. In fact, them waking up and not realizing how much time had passed is almost 100% confirmation that they were inside of the void. That's exactly what happened to Molly. But this time, it's a bit different because the AI has now developed far beyond what it was when the show initially aired. From what we know about this show, everything has some sort of personality. Everything has some sort of soul. Everything in the show has some sort of voice. It has some sort of soul, except for one thing, and that's the AI that's controlling everything. But artificial intelligence doesn't have a soul, and that's why the the Void is the way that it is. That's why it tries to fix things that don't need to be fixed, why it's so focused on profit margins rather than creativity, why it adds generic villains into a show that honestly really didn't need it. I think it's clear that in the original series, the AI was just a background algorithm, something to try to help Elmore run smoothly, but in the new series, I don't think it's gonna be that benign. Gumball has always been a show that does fantastic social commentary, and when it eventually tackles AI, in which it's absolutely going to, it is going to do it via the Void. And given the fact that AI has developed so much since the original series ended, I feel as though the Void is going to be even more terrifying than it originally was. But of course, that's just a theory. And if you like that theory and want to hear more, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help out the channel a lot. I do long-form videos on cartoon theories and analysis, and I do daily shorts videos. So if you like this content, make sure that you support the channel because it really does help out a lot. But that's all I got for today. So until next time, Tanuki crew, peace, peace.